Thank you again. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Legit Leadership Live, episode 7. I am so psyched to have my lovely friend here, an amazing collaborator, and just someone who we really connect as sisters. And Carrie Skowronski, welcome to Legit Leadership Live.
I am so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Raabia.
Yes, thank you so much. And to all of you, thank you for your patience today. Just as a reminder, Legit Leadership Live is a series that we started to really focus on having amazing kind of real-time conversations with leaders to get into the nitty-gritty of how can we create better workplaces? What are experiences of these leaders that we can learn from? And so here we go. Carrie, in a moment, I'm going to share a little bit of your bio, but can you let the crew here know how we met and who you are? And then we can take it from there.
That's going to take up the whole hour. Okay, so I'm Carrie Skowronski, founder of Leadology, and we'll talk more about what I do throughout the hour. But Raabia and I met because my very first client was Bumble, and I was consulting with them. And one of the big projects, most exciting projects that we got to work on was this conference for their top accounts. And they really wanted it to be this like star-studded event with amazing keynote speakers. And we came across Danny Meyer doing keynotes for his book, Setting the Table, which to me is my hospitality Bible. So I come from retail 20 years, and Kristen Bates, who maybe some people on here know, if anyone from my community is joining, introduced me to the book. And it was something that was really important to us when I worked at Coach. So anyway, we got Danny to do a keynote. And one of the suggestions that we learned was that you were consulting with them, and that they had the option to bring one of his consultants in to help us actually do a training to operationalize the things that he talked about in the keynote, so that these salon owners and managers can go back and really truly implement what he talked about. And that was you. And so working with you was amazing. I'm pretty sure that you had the choice, that we were going to be friends forever. And here we are. We get to
Here we are
now. So told you so.
Oh my God.
Really
Totally hard to get rid of, and that is a good thing. So I'm delighted. And, I have to thank you, Carrie, for connecting me with so many amazing people, amazing opportunities where we've been able to collaborate. Carrie and I are both fellow members of the Hive Consulting Collective. It's a group of 7 amazing powerhouse leaders, entrepreneurs, where we really focus on leadership readiness and getting people, set up for success in whatever role they're in their organizations.
Yeah.
So that's been amazing. And the other thing I want to just share with all of you is Carrie is also known in the leadership world as a courage builder. She is, as she mentioned, the founder of Leadology, which is a consulting firm specializing in leadership development programs for individuals and companies. So we hang out in the same sandbox. And drawing on Carrie's global background in organizational leadership, training as a Gallup Strengths coach, certification in applied positive psychology, and a certification with the Dr. Brené Brown. As a narrative lead facilitator, Carrie's coaching has helped transform multi-million-dollar companies, including Bonobos, Honor, Delta, Estée Lauder Companies, Kendra Scott, Bumble, Shutterstock, and so many more. Like, I'm talking basically everyone knows Carrie. So now you all are in the with this rock star.
Who's that lady? I don't even know who you were talking about just now. Thanks, Raabia. Our friend Sarah's here. Hey, Sarah.
Oh, hi, Sarah. And one of the things, Carrie, and we can just kind of dive right in. One of the things I absolutely love about collaborating with you and just knowing you and befriending you is is the fact that you are so passionate about managers and passionate about helping them, show up as the best leaders they can possibly be. And we often joke because I know I also work with managers. I also work with frontline staff. My area of expertise really is with executive teams, senior leadership teams. And I know you love working with managers. So we're kind of like this yin and yang, where when we collaborate with clients, it's the best of both worlds, if I do say so myself. So,
I think so too.
Can you tell us, Carrie, where does that passion come from in working with that distinct strata within organizations?
Hey, look, I don't work in HR anymore, so I can openly exhibit favoritism for managers. Like they, I just, here's the thing. It's where everything happens. It's where everything happens. Managers are the ones who they're taking direction from the top. They have to influence their teams, the people who are doing the work, right? The daily transactions to get things done. They have to influence sideways with their peers, vendors, customers. They're just really important. They're really, really important. And oftentimes they have to execute and implement on things that really weren't their decision. And that can be frustrating and overwhelming, sometimes exciting, depending on how they feel about it. But helping, and they just have such great intentions to have credibility and be the go-to person. And so anywhere I can help even just one person navigate that a little more easily and with great results, then sign me up. But they're my favorite. Like I think traditional training plans are about training people from the top and cascading it down. And that's great. Of course, the leaders have to be very involved. The reality is, though, everything's happening from the center outwards. They are the heart of the organization. They're the ones who get things done. So I love them. And also, too, I'll just say, I never reached the executive level myself until I started my own company. So I just have a real passion for those people in the middle who are up against a lot. Their workloads are really heavy and they want to be successful. So
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And, on the note of being successful, I know this is, this year also with the COVID-19 and the whole pandemic and then restructuring the business. I'm curious to know whether it's like within the last 15, 16 months or just generally speaking, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that you see managers making in terms of their own leadership? And why do you think that is?
Oh boy, you had to bring the pandemic into it, huh? Okay, so
sorry.
No, I mean it's real. It's the collective experience right now. So I think at the beginning, heading into this like forced work from home, it was a forced transition, and it was one that was rejected by many for years until we were forced into remote work and working from home. I think if you're a manager or a leader who leads from command and control rather than meaning and purpose, you definitely struggled. If you were think about it. If I don't see what you're doing, if we're not here in person together, kind of like watch over and physically see what you're working on. If it is, if you're because I said so kind of manager, and then you transition into work from home, I bet you struggled. If you are the kind of leader who keeps people really connected to the meaning and the purpose, and when you delegate work to them and set expectations, if you can clearly define the why behind that, and by doing that task, here's the contribution you're making to the overall organization. If you're someone who is, maintaining your ongoing one-on-ones and giving them feedback they can learn from, and therefore building trust, then you're going to be much more successful. So I think that was one mistake I think we saw definitely throughout this pandemic period. I think another one is just like not focusing on your own learning. Of course, I'm biased because we are, learning and development professionals, but I think it's too easy to say there's no time. And someone taught me a great, I guess, consultant on habit building. Her name's Heather McKee, who recently I just became connected with. She talked about this idea of like self-determination theory. And she said, you know what, I wonder if this like objection of time is a word for something else. And is it, you know, is it priorities? Like if it's just not important to you, we're going to dedicate time to things that are important to us. But I think the ongoing learning to focus on ourselves is really critical, even just to pause and reflect. I'm not saying sign up for a 2-hour class, but just like once a week, pause and reflect and think about like what went well, what can I do better? What did I learn? Just to constantly give yourself that guaranteed renewal to reset and, you know, learn from mistakes, but also your successes. Like we have to study success too. So it was kind of run on. I think I kind of blended a few things there, but
no, that's so key. I think you're listing some really important mistakes that happen, you know, inadvertently, right? I think then, and as we know in this world, nothing is intentional, right? And I think there are good intentions around supporting managers, but things that I wanted to kind of get your take on, because I know you hear it all the time. When you work with that manager level, what do you feel are the biggest frustrations? Like how are they not feeling empathized with, or how are they not feeling heard? Because the other big piece of why I'm asking that is, as you know, part of my target audience here is working with senior leadership teams, and hopefully they're tuning in, because I want them to also hear like what might be going on. Like even though you have your ear to the ground on the business, the pulse, of course, is where the managers are, as you're saying. So where are they feeling unheard, unseen, maybe misunderstood, that you would like to kind of shed awareness on?
Well, one of the biggest requests that we get is how to manage up. So those
there we go.
Leaders should know that the people below them are, it's so interesting, because you and I recently had a shared experience where, you know, the leading was like, yes, like we develop these managers, and we want to help them be really great and efficient, and you know, improve how they're developing and getting work through their teams. And then we work with that level of managers, and they're like, yeah, we're good with our teams. How do we manage up? So, and that's not unique to one client. That is everywhere.
Literally everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things is when they do find the courage to raise an issue, when they do find the courage to ask some clarifying questions, I want leaders to know that it's not always pushback and disagreement. Like appreciate took them a lot of courage and thought to go to you, the leader with all the title and power, to make a suggestion, share an idea, present a solution, to even disagree with you, to ask questions, to clarify. They're asking questions because they're committed to getting the result. They just need to clarify the details. They're not asking questions to poke holes in what you're doing. And so I hope that the more leaders can just, you know, respond and listen, to learn and to have empathy and appreciate how much courage it takes for that person to raise those things with you. I think very generally where maybe they feel unheard. I think there were a lot of lessons learned over the last year working from home, and how we work and the quantity of work. And you know, I think they also need an advocate. I think many managers, they feel like they have to be the yes person. They feel like they, you know, don't have that control. They feel like they're like, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do. This was the direction we got, and everything is a priority right now. And I do wish that some leaders would have a real hyper focus on prioritizing. And I actually just had the pleasure of watching attending the Gallup at Work Summit last week as part of
Mm-hmm.
my continued strengths development.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched a really great breakout where 3 senior HR leaders from Nike, WW, Weight Watchers, and Levi's were all talking about just lessons learned from the past year, but also focused on reentry. And many about how they were really focused on prioritizing and actually deliberately trying to keep work off of people's desks that weren't the highest priorities aimed at the mission of where they're going as possible. And the woman from WW said something really great. She said that as leaders and managers, we have to protect their peace, like our team members. We have to protect their peace and protect their boundaries. So again, when they're saying that they're overworked and they're burnt out, like we have to pay attention to that. We can't just say, you know what, I know it's a tough time. We're all just heads down doing the work.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of courage for people to say. So we've got to pay attention to it and have more compassion for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that that point, right? It takes courage, and especially because the human dynamic around positions and authority, even with newer organizations, maybe the startup world, they're a little bit flatter sometimes in terms of the structure, but the same amount of courage, I think, is required oftentimes to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And Carrie, actually on that note, because I know you've worked with well-established companies that have been there forever, and then you also have worked with up-and-coming startups, and we've partnered together on some of those engagements. I oftentimes get this question, like, how do you think issues around leadership differ, and the kind of problems that you're brought in to help to solve or deal with from as it relates to being a startup or a long established tenured organization. So I wanted to know, like, what's been your take on that, particularly around the manager level when it comes to the up and coming new startups versus ones have been there for a while? Like, what do you see as similarities, or where's the blend in the Venn diagram, and then what are kind of some differences you pick up on?
Oh, these are good questions, Raabia. Someone in the chat just called me a rock star, but their name is not on there, so I want to know who that is.
Carrie, a rock star. You just won something.
Exactly. So, gosh, I don't think that the problems are that different here. At the end of the day, Raabia, you and I are focused on human behavior. That was one of my first and biggest lessons learned when I left Coach and 20 years of retail and thought I could be a consultant, a learning development consultant. And, I actually wondered myself, can I be relevant in multiple industries and multiple size companies? And luckily with the help, there's Honey. I love it. She's awesome. She's, hi, Honey. So one of the quickest things that I learned, though, was that it's not necessarily about the type of industry or the size of the company. Like, human behavior is human behavior, right? Everybody needs feedback. Everybody needs a coach. Every manager needs to learn how to delegate effectively. Hey, Hottie, she's so cute. She's one of our LinkedIn friends. She actually works at LinkedIn. So,
oh my gosh, someone on the inside.
It's kind of like meta, yeah. So yeah, I think that the skills are the skills. I think what I notice sometimes with startups is 2 things: that those managers actually have, how do I say this? They might be a newer leader, but they have a very senior position. Like they've risen to the top of their game pretty quickly to be a manager and to be in charge of really big things and big decisions and big work. But because they haven't been maybe in the business as long, or maybe worked for larger companies, they've had no manager training. So they've risen to the top pretty quickly because of their amazing technical skills, but they haven't had that manager training. So I think that's where you and I have definitely been really great partners, because it's like this person needs some like executive level development, and simultaneously they need some of the foundational management skills. And that's where you and I pair really well together. I also think in startups, when they're making, I think of like, startup versus like one of the Fortune 500 companies, when you're trying to implement something, launch something, change something, in startups, it's like, changing directions on a jet ski where you can just whip around pretty quickly, where in a large company, it's like trying to turn around a whole entire cruise ship, and that takes much longer.
Totally.
So I think those are some of the things that I've noticed. I just think it's like the difference in exposure in a smaller startup. Also the pace too in startups is just really, things are constantly changing, and it's really fast. So I think those are the biggest differences. But at the end of the day, these skills that we talk about are industry agnostic, and it's human behavior, even through the last year. Like what changed with leadership?
Sure.
It's not really what changed, it's how we do it that needed to adjust.
Yeah, for sure. No, I've seen that too, because a lot of folks will be like, well, what industry do you particularly like to focus on? And I'll use that term all the time, like industry agnostic, because at the end of the day, whether you're in healthcare, banking, finance, airlines, cruise lines, retail, like whatever it is, the human need for being seen and recognized and belong into a culture where your opinions are valued, and that you have the skill set, not just to do the technical piece, but as you're saying, to lead people is a whole nother technical skill set, called leadership, right? And leadership development. So I think that's such a universal component for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And there's still a lot to learn in much larger companies. Like you can still find a way to have a profound contribution in a large organization. It just has to be really clear about, from your leader, like, what are you doing? What are you working on? What experience, exposure are you getting? And I do think that's where larger companies, because of their experience, it might be easier to see a career path. It might be, you have much broader exposure to a lot of different systems and processes, and codified best practices. And there's de-learning in that too.
For sure. And I know one of the kind of, if I could say, the codifying of a best practice for you as a consultant, as a coach, as a leadership development facilitator, is really focusing on strengths as kind of the heart of the work that you do. And I'm so grateful to you, Carrie, because you're one of the people in my circle of life who has really flipped the switch in terms of how I approach coaching as well, and have such passion for strengths now. Thank you to you for opening up the door and making that a part of the day-to-day. So for our listeners out there, I know that if you know Carrie, and if you know me, you probably have heard us talk about strengths before. Can you give the crew here a rundown of what is this notion of strengths-based leadership and coaching, and why are you so passionate about it in your day-to-day?
I want to know what attracted you to it. Like I talk about it all the time. Like there's no escaping it. Like if you are in my world personally or professionally, like all of my friends have taken the assessment, my family's taken the assessment. It just helps with like really deeply and more, I guess, just more deeply getting to know people. Since we've been working together on it, what drew you into it besides me just like incessantly talking about it?
That was it. You forced it on me, Carrie. No. You know what? I think it was the idea that there is a vocabulary, like a shared vocabulary where we can have conversations. And it's not, I'm not a weirdo because I think this. I'm uniquely talented in these ways, and everyone in my life, whether they're clients, friends, family, they are also uniquely talented. And I think the one thing that really struck me was, how many times in life, and do we have that moment where we're like, oh my gosh, how could they not think of something this way? Like, how can they not see it the way that I do? And I find that when it comes to miscommunications or run-ins, or kind of when there's like a butting of heads between two or more people, oftentimes it's the lens through which we're viewing something. And the fact that there is language within strengths around where our brain goes to first, what our home base is. That was the big draw because it makes it less personal. Even though it's personal to you, I think it kind of neutralizes the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, all of that really matters. And just imagine like how many times we're at work and you get an email and you're like, oh my God, how do they not think about it this way? Right? How
What is
many
this person
times?
doing?
Yeah, exactly. But what you said about having a consistent language for performance is one of the most powerful like baselines of strengths-based development, to try and like really understand that. And the powerful self-awareness that you gain from that report. So one of the reasons why I chose that assessment to be a core part of my business at Leadology was for two main reasons. One was just the spark of positivity that you get. Like,
Yeah.
we are all our own worst critics. I have no interest to sit there and read a report about all my weaknesses because I can completely add on to that, right? Great. But for me, something that really resonated for me, that is like a quote or an analogy that we use a lot in strengths development is like the Einstein quote, right? Like, if you expect, if you want to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then it will believe its whole life that it's stupid. And I can remember feeling, even in my last job, I remember sitting there in presentations, having exposure to very senior leaders, and all of them were presenting all of their charts and graphs and strategies and numbers and data and all of this. And I can remember sitting there thinking like, oh my God, I think this is the limit for me. My brain doesn't work that way. I don't want to spend my time in Excel spreadsheets and in charts and graphs. And the idea of strategic thinking was like the number one competency where I worked, and I watched really smart, talented people get passed over for promotions because they didn't necessarily present as like super strategic thinkers, nor did I. And so, I just thought, like, where do I go from here? But yet I knew I was confident in the talents that I had. And so I think dipping into strengths-based development helped me gain extra confidence. It gave me a new language to be able to advocate for myself in terms of the value that I can bring to my work, in a productive way, right? Not in an entitled kind of like, begging, demanding kind of way, but in a productive way. Like, here's how you win by working with me. The other reason was because I have an obsession with millennials and Gen Z. Like, I just love
about that. They get a bad rep.
Love them. But so many people are like, oh, they're entitled. We know the stereotypical judgments. But I was like, okay, they want praise. Let's work with that. If that's something that they value, let's work with that. And so I thought strengths was the way to do that. How do we celebrate what's right with them? How do we deepen that with them? And then how do we help them productively apply that? And again, in a way that doesn't perpetuate some ridiculous stereotype of being entitled. So it was this motivation to work with that. I mean, I got certified, I think, like 8 years ago. So it would work with the early folks and help to support them to be able to find a new language to advocate for themselves. And I really do think that strengths does that. Imagine that on a team, right? Imagine a team of people who have varying degrees of experience, and they're coming from across generations and, different backgrounds, and imagine them all capable of communicating the value that they can bring to the work and the contributions that they can make, so that everyone is, contributing in a way that feels really good to them. So those are my two motivators for getting into strengths.
I love that. And I think the other beautiful piece of it that connects with what you're saying is understanding when maybe the volume is up a little too high or a little bit too low within our top 5, let's say our top 5 themes that we get back from the results, where it's not so much that, and I know you say this all the time, low strengths doesn't equal no strength. So if it's the bottom half, it doesn't mean those are your weaknesses. But usually it's like maybe too much of a good thing is showing up kind of as a bad thing right now. And that might present as a weakness in how we work with others or how we kind of approach things sometimes too.
Yeah, one of the things we say, and well, Clifton said, so he was the positive psychologist and creator of the assessment. And I think the earliest book on strengths was Soar with Your Strengths. It's my favorite. Super simple, quick read. But I don't want to oversimplify it. It's simple, but really powerful. And one of the things that he says that strengths develop best in relation to other people. And so it can't just be like, well, this is just how I am because these are my strengths, right? It doesn't work that way. We have to understand how we're showing up, how we're received by others, and how, our impact on the work as well, and be able to turn the dial up or down. We often say too that you have more weaknesses in your top 5 strengths than you do with those things that are at the bottom. Because we just call them like non-talents, so for me it was really validating, because remember I said I was like really intimidated by the charts and graphs people, and number 33 and 34 way there at the bottom is analytical and strategic. So so I was like, there it is, no wonder. But me trying to imagine my career path, trying to do those things on the bottom, it was giving me a lot of anxiety. And so knowing the value that I bring up at the top still matters, but the self-awareness of like where my blind spots might be, where I might be overdoing it, where I might be, here's something really important that I just talked about on Instagram last week. Satya Nadella was one of the keynote speakers of the Strength Summit and CEO of Microsoft, for anyone who doesn't know. And when he talked about strengths, he was like, we have to develop our strengths and we want to lean into our strengths. And, we want to deepen that. But what else matters about weaknesses is that, like, here's the thing, we have to be aware of them so we can manage them. And what he said is that I have to make sure that my weaknesses are not roadblocking someone else's strengths. So as a leader, and that right away, I was like, oh boy, okay, I need to go schedule a couple meetings with people on my team, because, if I am like changing my mind all the time and constantly customizing, and there's not a single SOP in my business, like that's really going to annoy people on my team, and they're going to feel pulled out of their strengths, right? When I have these beautiful people on my team who do have strategic, who do have analytical and achiever and arranger, maximizer, right? They want to deliver too. But if I'm constantly in a million different directions, I'm going to be pulling them out of their strengths. Like someone who has analytical, who needs time, because they're so committed to precision and accuracy and being thorough, but my activator is like, has a need for speed. I'm going to pull them out.
Really, Carrie? Yeah.
If I can just give them the time, I'm going to get the best out of them. So I thought that was really powerful as leaders, to make sure that my weaknesses are not pulling someone else out of their strength.
Yeah. And I think one last thing on strengths, like as you were talking about your activator, something that you and I joke about a lot, and is that notion of complementary partnerships, where I know I mentioned the yin and the yang, the executives and the managers, but even in terms of strengths, I think my activator is like 33 or 34. And I know yours is up top. And sometimes you're like, Raabia, just do it. Just get it done. Just off the cliff, and sometimes I need that kick in my butt to get things done, because, recovering perfectionist, right? High responsibility, high achiever. And so there can be a golden opportunity to kind of fuse them in a way where it works. And my strategic is number one. So I love partnering with you, because I think we think about things that the other maybe not necessarily would, and figure out how do we make it work into like a golden opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I know. Yes, I know, because you have an amazing, beautiful program that needs to be out in the universe. People need it. And so that's where I think that we are complementary partners, right? Like, it's not that I reject, strategic thinking or, those analytical talents. It's just that I need to surround myself with people who do have those things to kind of help fill in the blanks for me, right? And so I think the strategic is beautiful. And another one of my favorite complementary partners is on here, Sarah Savella.
Sarah.
She's another one who we both love to do the things that the other one doesn't. And if I can give you any recommendation for your strategy for managing this for anyone here, it's just like, find the person who loves to do the things that you don't.
That you don't,
Right? To me, it's shocking. It is shocking that people love Excel spreadsheets. But
I know. That's what I call my brother. I know. I don't even know how to make them alphabetized. Like, forget it, or add things. Yeah.
And they all think it's so easy. And I'm like, and do it. Fantastic.
No, I appreciate that. And Vincent McDonald, who was a previous guest of ours here, he was saying that, and thanks, Vincent, for that comment. It's really something in terms of thinking about how your strengths could be a roadblock to someone else, or when they're showing up as a weakness. So that's a really interesting angle, Carrie, that you're mentioning there, that I think is important, because strengths is so much about self-awareness, but I feel like it helps, and I would say it helps to cultivate more situational awareness too. Like, not just how do I show up in relation to the rest of the world, essentially.
Exactly. It is. So we say that, like, you get your list of strengths. We say that they're actually talents. They're talent. And when we're using them in the right way, when they are productively applied, then they're strengths. But there are times when we dial it up too high, when it's not the right use for that situation, and then it might not be received as a strength. It might be received as a weakness, and we just have to be, aware of that. I also think of my strengths, because I love to my key ingredients. Like, these are my ingredients that make me uniquely me. They are undeniably me. But in every situation, it's up to me to craft the right recipe of those strengths, right? So if I'm looking at my top 10, it's up to me to get really deliberate and intentional about the right recipe.
For sure. And, one of the things I wanted to kind of shift to, but very connected, is you were recently at the summit, which I think is incredible. And I know you commit to going there regularly. What have you picked up on in terms of the new manager piece around leadership? Like, can you share some highlights with us, as I know we have a lot of interested managers and senior leaders having a listen today?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm still wrapping my head around it, but here's what I know. I printed up my Clifton Strengths for Managers report. So the first thing you need to know is that you don't have to retake any kind of assessment. You just simply have to go in and I think it's like $40 to unlock the report, where you get descriptions of your top 10 strengths as a manager. So it tells you, it gives you tips for how to show up as a manager, how to use them, watching out for your blind spots, and just a description of your strengths as a manager. So it's really powerful. It's also I don't want to say, I'm going to call it real talk. It's really honest. It's just really, I don't want to say harsh, but it's direct. It's direct. That's the word. It is direct. It is, the blind spots are direct. So when I was reading mine, I was like, oh my God, this thing, I was like, this reads like a 360. I feel like, was this computer generated, or did my team actually give this feedback? Because it's stuff that I've kind of been aware of, but it's good to see it on paper again. So I think every leader, every manager, if you are responsible for one person, you should definitely read this report and get to know your strengths as a manager. But also, I just love the tips on how to productively use your strengths as a manager, because I don't think it's always something you're going to find in your corporate competencies, on your OKRs, on your performance plan. I think there's some really cool, unique ways, because when I read that and it's aligned to my strengths, I feel moved to action in a way that feels individualized to me. So the way I'm going to show up as a manager is going to be totally different from how you show up as a manager, and how Vincent McDonald shows up as a manager, and Hani Cohn and Sarah Savella and everybody here, Ezra Naines, of how all of us show up as a manager. It's all going to be different. So when you read that, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to be like that manager who got results from, I don't know, maybe they get results from command and control, who knows? But, I'm a different kind
of information. Yeah.
I lead with relationships, but someone who's really good with the spreadsheets, they're going to lead differently. So it's just really just good new insights to be able to play with that and explore that and pay attention to that. But yeah, it's just like another layer of self-awareness. And self-awareness isn't going to do any good unless you do something with the information, right? So you get that right. You get that layer of self-awareness, and now you're like, oh, I can make better decisions about how I'm going to choose to show up, about how I'm going to approach this change, this transition back to the workplace, this new project or new initiative, this difficult conversation. So it gives you a bigger toolkit.
Wonderful. And, Carrie, on that note, because we're going to wrap up in just a moment here, and I know you and I can talk leadership all day, and it's one of our favorite topics, that and colored contact lenses in the David Bowie era, which is a story for another day. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask is for up and coming managers, who, and also for some who have, continued to be in their roles for a while, or who are looking for new leadership opportunities, whatever it is, what would be some of your biggest, your biggest piece of advice to help them grow and develop in a way that helps them show up authentically and with the courage that you're such an advocate for?
Oh gosh, I love them the most, right? Like they're just such sponges. And they're so ambitious. They want to learn everything that they can. I mean, it's so good. Okay. So in position, wherever you are right now, look for opportunities for everyday leadership. Even if you don't have a direct report, there's a lot that you lead. Right? You have to lead your own work. You have your own work. Maybe you lead meetings when, think of ways to like level up your presence in some of these meetings. Volunteer to be someone's onboarding buddy, right? I think the best thing to do is start to get a sense of how do you teach others? How do you develop others? So be someone's onboarding buddy so that you can be their go-to person in an organization and teach them, the way that your organization does things. Ask for feedback to find out what you might need. I think oftentimes people get promoted for their technical skills. They're not getting promoted because you've done a great job of like managing people. So, start to explore what's needed in your organization. But just finding those opportunities for everyday leadership. Like maybe you're not giving your direct report feedback, give a peer feedback, give them praise, give them recognition with impact that they can learn from. So I definitely think there are opportunities in position before you're actually a manager. Do practice demonstrating some of the foundational leadership attributes.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's about working out the muscles in the gym, and it's kind of like, well, the world is your oyster in terms of how do you want to approach it? Do you want to take this as an opportunity to flex those muscles and demonstrate some leadership qualities and characteristics, or you want to just kind of coast? Like it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of brain effort too, right? It's not like we just wake up one day and we're a great leader. That's kind of unheard of, I think. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think it's I think it's the hardest transition. I mean, I've never been an executive. I own my own company. This transition wasn't harder than going from individual contributor to manager. That, to me, that buddy to boss transition is the absolute hardest, where it's like, I was a superstar and I got promoted, and now it's like, oh, wait a minute, like my superstardom now is highly dependent upon these people out here.
Yeah, so and there's a microscope on it.
Yeah, it's a tough transition. So, so Ezra likes the idea of like those moments every day. Yeah, 100%. They're there every single day.
Every day.
And I say every day.
Too many.
Every day. And also pay attention to your role models too. I think, whether it's, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's someone else, maybe it's someone not even in your organization, but I think pay attention to role models and watch how they do it as well. And also come follow me and Raabia on Instagram, because we've got lots of over there. We talk about this stuff all the time. So
we do. Yes. Well, Carrie, thank you. And on that note, as we wrap up, I know it's easy for us to be like, hey, you should learn how to give constructive feedback, or you should, be advocates of those everyday moments. And here's the thing, we don't just talk about it. We're also about it in terms of helping to cultivate these skills, because I don't think anyone is born knowing the 5 steps of giving effective feedback, or the 3 key steps for delegating effectively. So our goal, I think, collectively is to demystify what it is to be a solid, legit leader. So on that note, Carrie, where can people find you? And if you want to plug in your Activate program, which is huge and really, really, I'm such a fan of it. Can you share a little bit as we close out?
Oh, gosh, yes. My baby. Okay, so come to getleadology.com and give us your email so that you can be the first to know when we relaunch Activate. But Activate is, we're actually going through a little bit of a rebranding. It's going to be 9 modules of all the core and foundational skills that you need to be a manager. And we have seen incredible results with the early groups that we've taken through this, both with our like B2C, like private members, as well as our corporate members who have joined in. And so we start with strengths. Of course, if you're going to work with me, there's no escaping strengths. And we continue to stack the most important skills, things like mindset and feedback, and receiving feedback, which is a skill I am never asked to teach, but is really important. We talk about navigating change and having difficult conversations, and how do you delegate in a way that develops your people and doesn't feel like dumping on them. We do talk about some coaching skills, because I think that's going to be the next big, if you're not already having this conversation, it's going to be the next really big expectation of managers in terms of, going from buddy to boss and boss to coach. And that's the thing. It's like anybody, you guys are all really smart. You have information at your fingertips. You can easily Google the 5 steps for giving feedback and read as many articles as you want with all the thought leaders that are out there. Until you have the opportunity to practice with a coach and with peers, and really have an opportunity to get it in your bones. That's when it really starts to stick. So join me, join Raabia. We're here to support you.
Totally. We're so here to support you. And I'm so grateful, Carrie, that you took some time out of your day today. I know you're in high demand across industries. So thank you for making space and being such a honest and really wonderful partner. I'm so inspired by you all the time. And I love how we can continue to grow together and create a better workplace for all individuals around the world. Right? So that's the goal.
Yes. Right. Everyone, it took me years to say, like, people are like, why'd you start your business? And in my head and my heart, I'm like, because so many people are suffering at work. And it took me, right? It took me years to actually saying that out loud. And so, let's minimize suffering in the workplace. It's just, there's no reason for it at all. There's no reason to suffer in the workplace. People should be able to thrive at work.
I agree. Well, that is the goal. Thank you.
This is
Thanks
so
so
fun.
much
I could do
to
this
all of
every
you.
single week. So
Let's do it. Okay, everybody, Legit Leadership Live between now and
every week.
2022. It's Carrie Skowronski, people. We have her. So lock her in.
You've unleashed the beast. Thank you for having me. And yeah, come follow along. Get Leadology on Instagram. GetLeadology.com is the website. We put out a newsletter every single week. So just
Wonderful.
come to us.
Come hang out. And I have to tell you, I get so many newsletters. I read Carrie's every time it comes out. I always learn so much. So thank you to all of you for your time today. I'm so excited to have you. Thank you again for your patience at the beginning of our conversation today with the tech issues. And stay tuned for July for our next guest. So more info coming up for Legit Leadership Live episode number 8. So I hope you all have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.